and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm Laurie Bull. Passing a budget is one of the main responsibilities of the state legislature, and while each year brings its own set of concerns and hurdles, the legislature has passed 3 consecutive budgets on time and with no tax increases. Here today to give us an update on this year's budget process, along with a few other timely issues, is State Representative Warren Kampf of Chester and Montgomery counties. Welcome.
Hi, Lori.
I think it's always important when we talk about the budget to talk a little bit about the process of how it works and the differences between the budget in Pennsylvania as opposed to the budget that gets worked on down in D.C. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So we have a requirement every year to actually have a budget, which is the first thing that's a little bit different from Washington. So the appropriations hearings, these are the appropriations committees in the House and the Senate, they happen after the governor gives his budget address. Those hearings happened over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and that's where the departments of the government, the various agencies, come in and talk to the committees of the legislature about what the proposal is. And then we digest that information. We certainly hear from our constituents and from people who are involved in programs or enterprises that receive state dollars. And then by the end of June, we are by law required to adopt a balanced budget.
Now, how are the revenues coming in so far this year? What does the money look like?
So I think we're about on projections, which means we're kind of in the middle of our budget year. The fiscal year ends at the very end of June, and that's why we have to have a new budget by that time for the next year. I think we're about on target, which is a good thing, but then there are increased costs to running just that set of priorities that we adopted last year, which means we'll need more revenue unless we tighten our belts.
Okay. Now, Governor Corbett kicks off the process by giving his budget address and laying out his spending plan. He focused on 3 main priorities. They would be education, job creation, and health care. Can you just briefly touch on those 3 spots that he mentioned?
Well, I mean, I think the issue for lots of us is K through 12 education. And in the last couple of years, we've put a great deal of money into those line items. But we're still in a situation where, compared to back in 2009 when the crash hit, they received federal stimulus dollars, billions of dollars, and they were using that to essentially fund education. That money's long ago been spent, so now we're relying on our own revenues. We are, I think this year in the proposal, potentially going to be above where the state has ever been before. So the most money into K through 12 that Pennsylvania has ever put in. But it's still a challenge to do that because, as I said, there are other things. The Department of Public Welfare, which is both the federal programs like food stamps and the Affordable Care Act, expansion of Medicaid, and those sorts of things, the costs for that are expected to go up by $500 million this year over last year. And that's a huge increase. And then I think with respect to job creation, the general idea is, we've got to continue to make Pennsylvania more job friendly, and where we can partner with, with entrepreneurs and enterprises that are doing well, we've got to do that. And sometimes that costs money.
Yeah, I think it usually does, doesn't it? First off, let's look at what options the governor is looking at for funding additional spending that he's proposed. Oftentimes, the liquor privatization issue gets brought up as a possible way to bring more money in. I guess first off, what are the prospects of that getting done? And secondly, does that even really go very far in addressing budget issues?
Well, I mean, let's start with the fact that the economy is, not great, but improving. And because it's improving, we are expected to receive revenues from, our current resources as a state government. at or above the level that we receive in this budget year. So that could be helpful. If the economy grows and things continue to improve in Pennsylvania, even slowly, that can help our budget picture. And that'll be part of the process when we adopt the budget. With respect to liquor privatization, if we were able to get that across the finish line before June, there would probably be some new revenue in terms of licenses for private businesses selling wine or beer or spirits, whatever the ultimate product is. And that could help with the budget year. I think, my sense is that there's a decent chance we will do something that the consumers will notice. My constituents will notice, yes, they've actually tried to bring Pennsylvania into the 21st century when it comes to wine and spirits. But just how much revenue that's going to be able to provide to us to balance the budget, I'm open-minded about it, but we'll see.
Certainly not a panacea that's going to fix all our problems.
I don't think so.
Okay. One of the big issues, as you mentioned before, is one that we talk about again and again, year after year. It's been there, and various things have been done to tweak it, and that's the pension problem. We have an issue with an unfunded liability with our state and school employee pension programs. Can you explain that problem, and can you also talk about what different solutions are out there right now?
So the problem is everywhere, right? So it's a $50 billion unfunded liability, and these are for our public pensions, for our state employees' pensions, and for our school district employees' pensions. Now, the employees have been paying in all along, but the state over the years has not put in enough money by anyone's measure. And then, of course, we had difficulties with the stock market and investments, and there's some other reasons as well. But anyway, in order to keep that thing going, you've got to put more and more money in that you didn't put in before. And that is having a crowding out effect on our own state budget. I think that line item is supposed to increase by $500 million this year over last year. And the same kind of thing is happening at the school district level. And that's having an impact on their budgeting, on the programs they can deliver, and also on taxpayers, because in order to have more resources, especially if you rely on a flat property tax, the school boards are at least tempted, and oftentimes they follow through, to raise taxes to pay for that bill. Okay, so then you ask, what can we do about it? So I have a proposal to create a defined contribution plan for all new people. That's like a 401k plan. That's the only bill that is on the House calendar for pension reform right now. It was voted out of committee in June of 2013. And, I'm still lobbying to try to get it passed. The good thing that would do is essentially, for all future hires, wall off the problem. We'd have an identified problem of $50 billion, and we'd have to, incrementally deal with that. But in the future, with a 401k plan where we make an annual contribution to each employee's account, that's the end of it for the taxpayer, and that's the end of it for the school districts and for the state. So this huge problem we have with budgeting, when you have these massive increases to fund your pensions, would go away eventually. I'm working on a proposal with some others in both the House and the Senate, and involving leadership in both chambers and the governor's office, which might be a compromise, might be a little bit of a pension or a piece that's a pension and a piece that's a 401k plan. The idea there is, let's try to provide a good benefit for future hires, but let's also try to generate some savings over what would be our cost if we did nothing. Mm-hmm. And if we can get that savings, then maybe we can provide some relief to the school districts, to the taxpayer, the property taxpayers, and also to the state budget. That's in process, but on that one, no guarantees. We need 102, 26, and 1. That's the majority in the House, the majority in the Senate, and then the governor's signature. So,
I would imagine that the aging population of Pennsylvania kind of exacerbates the problem as well, that maybe we don't have enough workers to pay the benefits for those that have retired.
Well, the way I think of it is our labor force in Pennsylvania has grown. We've added jobs in the last 3 years. I think the number is about 150,000, which is pretty good. But we also have an aging population, so when people retire, they're sort of, they're going out of the workforce. And so our growth maybe isn't as strong as it could be because of that phenomenon. And there are lots of reasons for that. But in the end of the day, I think you're right. A big part of all of this, all of state government's operations, all of the school district operations, is the growth of the economy, the growth of the labor force. That's something I've been working on a great deal, and it's critical for us to operate today, tomorrow, and 50 years from now.
Well, since you mentioned job creation and what we can do about it, certainly there have been some successes with some tax initiatives in the past years in the budget. But also, you've been working on a program that became law last year called Innovate PA. Can you update us on that program and how it's doing so far?
Right, so Innovate PA is essentially to help the entrepreneurs all around the state. And Pennsylvania is actually way ahead of other people on this. We have been for 30 years. We created these things a long time ago called the Ben Franklin Partnerships. And they're basically public-private partnerships. They do use some state resources and some federal resources. But by vetting the entrepreneurs who come to them for some financing and some help, they attract a lot of venture capital from all around the world, from California, from overseas, and from here in Pennsylvania. In the last few years, those entities and some others like them have been financially challenged too. They've not gotten as much resources from the state, and the market has not returned resources to them, because when they invest in a company, they often get resources. But if the economy isn't doing terribly well, that doesn't happen as rapidly. So anyway, so Innovate PA would inject $75 million this summer into the Ben Franklins, into the life science greenhouses, and into a venture program through the Ben Franklin Authority. I think this would be a great thing. The entrepreneurial and the venture capital world has been really begging for it for the last couple of years in Pennsylvania. We're one of the few states that in the last couple of years has done something like this, or all around the country. But entrepreneurs and big companies look at this. They want to see what the entrepreneurial pipeline is like. Down in my area, there are a lot of people who have benefited from Ben Franklin, and there are a lot of employees that are employed in Ben Franklin alumni companies. But a lot of the private sector look at, what is this state doing when it comes to innovation, technology, life sciences, compared to that state? Or what is Europe doing, or some other place around the world? And we need to be in that game. So Innovate PA has got us in that game, and it's being implemented, having passed into law in the very beginning of July last year.
Great. You mentioned life sciences. Can you just give us a little bit of a perspective on the promise of that industry, and what areas of the state are really leaders in that area?
Well, southeastern PA, Chester County, Montgomery County, and the others in that sort of 5-county region are a big part of the life sciences sector of Pennsylvania. But there are others. Western Pennsylvania around Pittsburgh, some in the Northeast, some here in sort of the middle of the state. So lots of areas where life sciences are important. And life sciences are pharmaceuticals, medical instruments, medical technology, and I think it's a $8 or $9 billion part of our economy every year, maybe even much more than that if you talked about indirect jobs. So it's important for us to let those folks know we care about them, they're important to us, and to create an environment here in Pennsylvania. You mentioned some of the tax changes we've done in the last few years, where they say, whether they're big or small, yes, this is a place we want to be.
Well, before we get any further, let's take a break. And Legislative Report will return in just a moment.
Did you know that the Pennsylvania Farm Show's history goes all the way back to 1851? Originally organized as a state fair by the Pennsylvania Agricultural Society, it was discontinued in 1899. It wasn't until 1916 that Charles Patton, the Pennsylvania Secretary of Agriculture, worked with others to develop a new agricultural fair which debuted in January 1917. It was in 1925 that the roots were laid for the farm show that we know today. The show had grown so large that 40,000 attendees were traveling to various sites all around Harrisburg. During this year, the Pennsylvania State Department of Agriculture took control of the event, and the legislature had decided to appropriate money that gave birth to the Farm Show complex. Finally, in 1931, the main exhibition building opened and welcomed 150,000 visitors to the show that year. Over the years, the farm show has continued to grow. Various events showcasing animals, products, and skills were added to the event. The farm show complex has also continued to grow, with more buildings and arenas being added over the years. The count stands at 24 acres inside 11 buildings and 3 arenas. Today, the show hosts approximately 6,000 animals, 10,000 competitive exhibits, and 300 commercial exhibits, along with over 500,000 visitors. Since the doors to the main exhibition building opened, the farm show has become the world's biggest indoor agricultural event. Now you know.
Did you know that on October 4th, 1911, the statues that greet visitors in front of the state capitol building in Harrisburg were dedicated to the citizens of the Commonwealth? In 1902, George Gray Bernard was commissioned to design the figures that embellish the front of the Capitol building. During the installation period, Bernard explained to the General Assembly what each sculpture symbolized. The Southern group, titled The Burden of Life, depicts the story of Adam and Eve followed by the fall of man in the forms of despair. The Northern group, titled Love and Labor, depicts male and female figures reaping fruits of labor and advances to a new Adam and Eve who gaze westward into the future. Recently, both sculptures underwent restoration to prevent further deterioration from their natural beauty. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. We're here discussing the state budget and some of the related issues that are happening this year along with the state budget. We finished up by talking about a program that you had championed, and that's Innovate PA and the idea of job creation there. We also talked about life sciences and the promise of that industry. It's been a key interest of yours, and recently you've been recognized for that. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, a couple of weeks ago, Pennsylvania Bio, which is the kind of the statewide trade association for life sciences in Pennsylvania, recognized me as state official, state legislator of the year. And part of it, I think, was for Innovate Pennsylvania that we just talked about. But where I live, so many of my friends and neighbors are employed in that industry or indirectly serve it. So it's natural for me to be an advocate in the state capitol. I did recently reintroduce a bill to create a higher research and development tax credit in Pennsylvania. Right now we give tax credits to companies that do research and development, not just in life sciences, but in all kinds of technology. And it's a $50 million a year tax credit. This legislation would take it to $100 million. I've been advocating for it for a little while now, and by reintroducing it this year, I'm going to try to make it a part of the budget process. But the whole idea, again, is to try to make Pennsylvania as inviting or as job-friendly as we can. Of course, we have services that we have to provide. We need revenue. We have to support basic education, K through 12 education. But we've been doing a bunch of things, and I've been advocating for over the last 3 years that I think have made real progress in making Pennsylvania job-friendly. We improved our unemployment compensation system to save employers about $300 million a year. We did tort or lawsuit reform. We reformed our corporate income tax so that we're eliminating the capital stock and franchise tax, which is a double tax on many of our businesses. It's a red flag around the world that we're trying to eliminate, so businesses will locate here or stay here. And then with the corporate tax, we've eliminated its focus on property or people. Essentially, we used to punish businesses. We would tax them based on how many people they had here. and whether they had a headquarters here. And that's precisely the wrong message you want to send to entrepreneurs who are growing here, or to companies that are saying, you know, I might locate in the northeastern part of the country, but I'm not sure I'm going to do it in Pennsylvania because of the situation they have there. So I think we have made a lot of progress on job friendliness, and I've been a real advocate for that, but there's still plenty more to do, Lori.
And you've kind of danced around the question that I'm going to ask, but on just a bigger picture level, what do you see the role of government in? Certainly government is not a job creator, but what is government and the role that it can play?
Well, I mean, I think we can talk a little bit here about education and then also about partnering. I mean, I think Innovate Pennsylvania, which helps the Ben Franklins, which helps venture capital, which helps our entrepreneurs, is a partnership. And in today's world, that partnership needs to be there, because otherwise you're going to end up with a stagnant economy, an economy that's not competing with other states and other countries. So I think it's critical to be a partner where you can. At the same time, you also have to make the environment friendly, even if you are not partnering, if you know what I mean. But then education is a piece of that. You have to provide a world-class education to our children. That's good for the children themselves, period, but it's also good for job creators and business and the economy, because you have students who are trained, ready to go into the workforce, have the skills that are necessary. And that's why, I mean, I would say the administration's proposal to try to put more resources in K through 12 is very important. Trying to put more resources into pre-K is very important. Those are the sorts of things that you can prioritize in a state budget. We have done that in the end over the last 3 years, but we've got to do it again, even though we're not in this, you know, robust time where, you know, there are tons of resources around for us to decide what to do with them.
Depending on where you live in the state, you may feel that the state funding formula is fair or unfair. Is the funding formula and how schools get their dollars, is that going to be addressed this year or looked at in any way, or is it going to be pretty much maintained?
Well, I do think, you know, first things first, I think you're right. The formula is not good, and we need to take another look at it. You know, in my area, we send a lot of taxes to Harrisburg. We pay a lot of money in property taxes and other local taxes, but we get very few state dollars compared to some other parts of the state. There are some good reasons for that, but there are also some pieces of the funding formula. The hold harmless clause. This essentially says you always get what you got the year before. And if there are parts of the state where the student body is shrinking, right? So the school district has less children, and yet they're still receiving the same state subsidy, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And some of those resources could and should be deployed in the areas that I serve. There is a bill now, I think, or at least there is a bill in draft to look at the funding formula for basic education. We did pass into law, and I think the commission has made its recommendation for special education funding, and now we've got to change that formula as a result of that recommendation. But the school boards and I think most of the stakeholders in education support that bill. So we're taking it in a sort of a systematic measure or way, and I think we'll get to that. I hope we do it soon, though.
And before we run out of time, we want to hit on some of the other initiatives that you've been working on. First off, you have a bill that would address things like food banks and help those places out. Can you talk about what that bill would do?
Well, I mean, as I said, you know, part of what we have to do in Pennsylvania is, you know, help provide for those people who are having a difficult time or, you know, through no fault of their own, need support. This basic needs tax credit, somebody in my district came to me and said, you know, they're in a nonprofit that is helping out people in need, and they're having a hard time attracting donation dollars from individuals or from companies because that money just isn't flowing. The economy is not that strong. So this basic needs tax credit, it's a $10 million program. It's a lot like the educational improvement tax credit. a company would be able to get a state tax credit for giving a donation to, say, a food bank. So that's the basic idea, try to help out these nonprofits that are part of our basic needs network in Pennsylvania. Try to help them out to be able to provide those basic needs to people.
They're a safety net for a lot of people.
Exactly.
That's right. And then also you had a bill related to deregulation. What is that one all about?
I mean, it's a phone regulation modernization bill. Telecommunications, another thing that is full of innovation and a lot of promise in Pennsylvania and around the world. There's lots of economic activity there. Unfortunately, we're still kind of stuck in I guess it's the very beginning of the 20th century, the early 1900s, where we had a public utility commission, our state, which was essentially regulating the old phone companies and still is today as a monopoly. But it's not a monopoly anymore. Everybody has a cell phone. Lots of people get their phone service through cable, right? Comcast or Verizon or their local cable company provides phone service to them. Well, the wireless companies and the cable companies are not regulated anywhere near as much as the old Ma Bell companies. So this bill basically is modernizing that so it's a level playing field. And in other states that have done it, it has generated all kinds of investment. It's made a lot of sense for job creation, and so it's a good bill.
Does it also benefit the consumer as well, or are there some side benefits there?
I think the trick there is try to have in the bill and in the law protections for consumers. And that's what we've endeavored to do with the first draft of the bill and now with some amendments. If you can get more investment and give more choice, that helps the consumer out. If you think about long distance service, remember in the old days we paid these huge long distance bills. Those things are basically gone. Well, this could do the same thing as well.
Great. Well, we just have about 1 minute to go here. So let's wrap up with projecting forward, looking forward. What's going to happen between now and June, and how does the process move forward with the state budget?
Well, I do think we're going to have a difficult budget this year. I mean, we have to be, I think we need to avoid increasing taxes on people. And when we're talking about increased expenses for federal mandates like Medicaid, that's going to be a real challenge to us. So I would say in the next couple of months, you'll see plenty of news reports and activity on that. But I'm still committed to doing an on-time budget that doesn't increase taxes on people.
That sounds great, and I'm sure the constituents are pleased to hear that from you. Thanks for spending time with us today, and if you have comments or questions about these or any other legislative topics, Representative Kampf's information will be shown on the screen in just a few seconds. Thanks for watching, and please join us again for Legislative Report.